Something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm your host, Mary Crafts, and oh yeah, you know it. You know what I'm going to say. Delighted. Oh, you get so tired of hearing that word from me every single week, but I can't describe it in any other way than to say I'm truly delighted. In fact, it's actually much more than that now. I'm grateful. I'm inspired by my guests. I'm living a better life because of my guests. And then about a third of them, of course, aren't my guests. They're just me. If I put out that I'm a profound thought leader, then it's better not be just people that I'm interviewing, unless they're completely amazing. And that's what I have for you today. Completely amazing. Welcome, Todd Sylvester.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mary. And I appreciate this opportunity. And you were on my podcast a few weeks ago and it was fantastic. And we had a great conversation and, today's going to be great. So thanks for having me today.
Okay. Well, let's start with that conversation on your podcast. Well, first, let's go back and introduce you for your, Todd. I loved how you described yourself. You're a mental fitness coach.
Yes.
You have every reason to describe yourself as you could be a health fitness coach because of your history, being an athlete and then a recovered athlete and all sorts of things. But you're a mental fitness coach, and I think that's a beautiful way to describe what you do.
Right.
Just like if I were going in to do a fitness coach, to think that I'm coming to you to receive a mental fitness. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean to you? How would you describe that to people?
Well, I think the biggest problem I see with myself and my clients and stuff I've been through in my life is we tell ourselves a story that something's wrong with us. And that story is what keeps us stuck. So really my job is to help you unravel that fairy tale story that you've been building for years in your head, that you're not good enough, you're different, so you can't connect, right? Your problems are too big, you'll never change. And so I was a drug addict, alcoholic for 11 years. The problem wasn't the drugs and the alcohol. It was, I was telling myself a story that I wasn't good enough. And that pain of that reality, at least what I thought was the reality, led me to try to numb those kind of things out. And so, so mental fitness, I just look at it as, it's important to work on our physical body, but it's more important to work, in my opinion, on our mental and our spiritual and our emotional health. And that's really where I come in and I help people kind of, recreate, new belief systems and that will set them free and empower them to do the things that they were born to do.
As I read your book, Todd, and in the beginning when you're describing your family life and growing up and your mom and your dad, and I think anyone who would read that book would relate to that because we have all gone through that period where we feel like even though our parents didn't mean to teach us that, they did. And that's okay because it's the plan.
Right.
We're not supposed to go through this life without any problems. We're supposed to go through this life with a lot of problems, and the more problems you work through, the better you off. You end up in the end. But you turned to alcohol so early in your life.
Yeah.
At age 12, you were stealing stuff from your dad's liquor cabinet, a sip here and a sip there.
Yeah.
I grew up in a home where my father smoked, and I can remember, even though I didn't know why, but because it was restricted, whenever he would leave the bathroom and his cigarette was left there, I was like, and so you take a puff on it. I'm not sure why or what that was supposed to get me, but I felt like, whoa, now I'm cool. Yeah. So as you start into that and you help people go back, because I feel like that's at some point what we all must do. How do you help people find the story that they've been telling themselves all these years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I typically will, ask them, when was the last time you felt completely happy? And it's usually with my clients, especially, we'll go back to, I think I was really happy in 4th and 5th grade. And then so it really, helps me get to the next question is, well, what happened in sixth grade? What changed? And then we start talking about, well, we moved, or my parents divorced, or I was bullied in sixth grade. I started getting bullied, or I started, some kids made fun of me at recess, and I started looking at myself differently. And so it's a really easy way, not always easy, but it's an easier way to get to what may have changed in their life. And what happens is,
Yeah.
one of the best definitions of depression I've ever come across in my 33 years in doing this is depression is pretending to be someone we're not. And so,
Ah,
so what happens is, like, let's go back to this fourth grade example. In fourth grade, kid believes in himself, loves himself, has faith as big as the universe. Fifth grade, parents divorced. They start thinking, oh, maybe I'm not enough. Why did my parents divorce? Maybe I wasn't good enough. Why couldn't they stay together, kind of thing. And so they start telling themselves a different story. I'm not good enough. And then that spills over into all kinds of other things, and it, gets reinforced with other things, with, entertainment and media and that kind of stuff. And so that's usually what I do, is to get back to that core issue of where it started. And then what we do is we start reshaping that, new belief system to help combat the one that got formed when they were younger.
yeah. I've never met anyone, and I have to say this in all my travels, in all my talks, in all my work in this field, who didn't have these issues.
Right. Yeah,
And
we
they're
all do.
so universal that, and there's three ways, as I always think about in healing. You do go back. There is that understanding where that came from. And then for me, understanding that my mom also carried that issue and that she
Yeah.
lovingly gave it to me
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
of not being enough. And
Yeah.
and then as I stopped and thought about it, I was thinking about my grandmother. And and I know now that that was her issue too. And fortunately, in a loving way, I passed that right on to my children. And now
Yeah.
they're dealing with that. But
Yeah.
the growth that happens. So you're looking back here. And then there's also that piece then where you're formulating what your life is going to look like in the future and where you're going.
Yeah.
And then the most important piece, right here today.
Yeah.
And where am I putting my feet today? So as you work through this with people, how do you see the actual process then of making those changes once they've begun that healing process? What's the path forward look like? What is today?
Yeah. Great question. You have to see that what you've been through happened for you. I have this statement that I always say to my clients: life happens for you, not to you.
Mm.
And I'm working with people who have been abused, who have been through some of the most traumatic things you can possibly imagine. And when I tell them, what if it happened for you? I mean, at first they look at me like I'm crazy. Like,
Yeah.
how could, my parents divorcing when I was younger, how did that happen for me? And what I do is I help them kind of figure out, well, let's come up with some ways. How did this actually happen for you instead of to you? And, obviously it's a very difficult process, but when they can start going, well, I understand relationships better because of it. I understand how important communication is. I treat my siblings a little better because of that. I mean, and the list goes on. And it's interesting when they start seeing it in that light.
Yeah.
It's like, oh wow, see how, like, I'll give myself as an example. I took my first sip of alcohol, 11 and 12 years old. That led to a full-blown addiction. I've been clean now for 33 years.
Yeah.
And if I could go back, if I could go back to my addiction and actually say something to it, like if I could walk back, hey, addiction, remember me? Remember Todd? You know what I would say to it, Mary? I would say thank you. And I would give my addiction a big hug. And the reason why I say that is because I'm sitting here talking to you. Had that not happened, I wouldn't be in a position to be on this amazing podcast. I never would have met Mary Crafts, who's an amazing individual. We never would have had that. I mean, and I look
Yeah.
back and go, I am so glad I went through that hell in order to experience these things today. And now because of that, I get to help other people. I really do believe we go through that hell so we can be in a position to help other people who are struggling. right? There was a beautiful saying that I stole from one of my clients a few years ago. He said it like this: I try to find myself I could not see. I tried to find my God eluded me. I tried to find my brother, I found all three. And I thought how profound that is. And so
Beautiful.
I went through what I went through because I think for the reason so I could give back and help other people on whatever that looked like for me. So I think anyone listening to this who's struggling and you're wondering why you're going through this, I think you're going through this because it's waking you up to the greatness that's in you so you can be in a position to help someone through it because you've been there, right? And you think of what you've been through, Mary, and all the stuff you've been through. Look what you get to do now. It's amazing what
Yeah.
you're doing. But had you not been through that, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing today. And you wouldn't have the same influence and the same impact on people's hearts and minds had you not been through what you've been through. So I just believe life happens for us. And when we can take anything, trauma, you name it, and we can see that it happened for us. And I'd like to give another example, if that's okay.
You bet.
One of my heroes in my life is J.C. Dugard. And J.C. Dugard, a true story, was kidnapped when she was 11 years old and basically sexually abused and raped for 18 years in a shed. And to this very day, J.C. Dugard has one of the most impactful lines I've ever heard. She was asked if she hated the guy that did this to her. And I'm sitting there thinking she's going to say, absolutely. But she said, no. She goes, if I hated this guy, I would still be stuck metaphorically in that shed. And she then goes on to say, I choose not to wallow in self-pity. And here's a person, if they had self-pity, we would all understand. And she's like, no, I choose not to do that. She goes, that's a waste of time. And I'm going, who is this woman? How is she doing this? And she was even asked, if you could change this, would you? And she said, no. And then it was like, what? You wouldn't change it? And she goes, no, I get to help millions of women all over the world who've been sexually abused because of what I went through. And right then and there, I said, this woman's my hero.
Yeah.
And so again, it happened. I know this sounds crazy. It happened for her on the level because now she gets to help other women who now listen to her because of what she went through. We can't change what happened, but we can actually look at it differently in a way to empower us to move forward. So that was a long way to answer that question, but
No, it's the perfect way to answer that question. And for me, that is exactly the answer. What you've outlined. I was giving a talk the other week to a group of women from the domestic violence shelter. And I simply asked how many in the room here struggle. And of course, they all raised their hand.
Sure, yeah.
Along with all the people who were there to help and support that night. And then I said, and how many of you feel that equates to being a failure?
yeah,
And they all raised their hand, even those who weren't in the shelter. And I kind of walked them through that process of what if you could make that critical change, that juxtaposition between equating struggle with failure
yeah,
and seeing struggle as the opportunity for growth.
yeah,
And the difference of what that looks like. So if you start with the first one and it means that you're a failure and look at all the things that happen as a result of that. Here, if you see it as growth, what happens as a result of that? It's a shift in mindset, Todd.
yeah, yeah,
One that a lot of people just really never make, unfortunately. And I've talked to people much older than me who are still in that, well, if this hadn't happened to me, I'd have made something of myself and, blah, 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 blah. And it's a shift in that thought process right at that critical step.
yeah,
So when I was on your podcast and I had no idea how long we were going to talk, you just kept asking questions and I just kept answering them. And of all the podcasts I've been on, I have to say you asked the most difficult questions of any podcast I'd ever been on.
wow,
And I was like, who is this guy? I mean, he's asking the tough questions of me like I know all the answers. But
yeah,
at that moment, when you asked them, I took just a breath and then dug deep
Yeah.
and allowed my mind to teach me in order to share with you.
Mm.
And I think that that's a gift that we all have, but we deny it.
Yeah.
We don't think that we have the answers inside,
Yeah.
that we have to read books or
Right.
listen to other people, or how many, hi, this is my 1,000th podcast for the month I've listened to. And now, not that you and I don't love podcasts, but
Sure.
they look for those answers outside.
Right.
And at that moment when I dug deep, I'm like, wow, this is an important question.
Yeah.
What is the answer to this question? And then I would just share.
Yeah.
And I would encourage all of my listeners just to always dig deep. And I know that that's where you find your answers and your directions. You know, you didn't have some PhD from Harvard to create this.
Right.
You dug deep.
Dug deep. Yeah. One of the things, Mary, I love that you're saying this. One of my rules with my clients is they can't say, I don't know. So when I ask them a question, they go, well, I don't know. I'm like, well,
Well,
no,
if you did know, what would like?
yeah, you actually do know. Let's sit here, like you just said. I'm going to sit here, take a breath. Let's dig a little bit, right? Let's, the best definition of breakthrough, of a breakthrough, is remembering a truth that you already knew, right? You just remember it, right? And it's like, oh wow, now I had a breakthrough. But see, you already had the answer in you. We just pushed you a little bit to dig a little bit more. So I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah. We have everything we need. That doesn't mean we don't need guidance from people. We all need that. But ultimately, when we get to that answer, we go, "Oh man, I had this the whole time."
Right? We were Dorothy in The Wizard
Yeah.
of Oz, and all the whole time we had the answer, but we kept looking in every single other direction to find the answer.
Yeah.
And eventually, she said, "All I had to do was to want to go home. All I had to do was to find my real self. All I had to do was say that I'm in the best possible place where I was in Kansas."
Yeah.
Huh. Crazy story there. So let's talk about you for just a minute. We talk about this digging deep.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about your journey, Todd, and how that you dug deep in order to find your way out.
Yeah. That's a great question. Looking back, I mean, I'm 54 years old now, and I look back in my life, and I pinch myself that I'm sitting here talking to you today. Even, I mean, seriously, like,
Yeah.
I've written 3 books. I've done a podcast for over 6 years now. It's ranked in the top 100 in mental health. I coach 15 clients every single day. I get to speak all over the place, and I go, what? How did that happen? Right? And it's because of the hell that I went through. And luckily, I had some people in my life that showed me the way. I had a mentor in my life that took me under his wing. But this mentor was fantastic. He was the same, just like what you were saying, is he made me dig deep to find the answers. He didn't give me the answers. He walked the walk with me, but he expected me to walk the walk. And, like I mentioned earlier, I was an addict for almost 10 years. And overcoming addiction was brutal, but what was even harder than that, stopping the drugs and the alcohol, was changing my belief system about me. This was the hardest digging I've ever done. I used to believe I was broken. I had something wrong with me, that no one's ever going to want to be with me. I was stupid. I'm a loser. I'll never get married. I mean, the list went on and on of all the negative belief systems that I had bought into. And that belief system was the cause of my suffering. And so, again, luckily I had
Hold
some
on.
people. Yeah.
Can you just say that one more time? That is so profound.
Yeah, it was
Your
my
book.
my belief systems were the cause of my suffering.
Wow.
Yeah, and so because our beliefs dictate our behavior. So when I'm doing unhealthy behaviors, I'm smoking, I'm drinking, I'm stealing from people, I'm manipulating, I'm doing horrible things. It's mirroring a belief system I have about myself. If I want that behavior to go away permanently, I must change the belief system. And once the belief system changes, the behavior changes automatically. It's actually a really beautiful process to go through that. Now, it is painful to go through that, but yeah, so overcoming those limiting beliefs, and and to be honest with you, Mary, I still have some beliefs I still wrestle with that I have
Really?
to.
You're not perfect?
Not far from it. Just
Yeah.
just ask my wife. She'll tell you. She'll give you a long list of things I got to still work on. But yeah, it's one of those daily things. And one of the greatest things my mentor taught me was to come up with a morning routine. And to this day, I call it my hour of power. It is. I call it another way. I call it is my morning meds. It's my morning medication. And if I win that first hour of the day, I win the rest of the day. If I lose that first hour of the day, I spend the rest of the day looking for it, which is a form of suffering, right? And so this morning ritual has been the single greatest gift that I have ever given myself. It is truly, and I know people hear this and go, "Oh yeah, great, he's got a morning routine." I wish you could be here when I'm going through this. I get emotional. I'm crying, happy tears of gratitude. I get up really early, Mary. I get up at 4:30, and people think I'm nuts. And I'm like, no,
Ooh.
no, no, you're nuts. If you knew what I was experiencing in this hour of power, you would go, oh, I get why you do what you do. Right? On the surface, yeah, 4:30, people think that's crazy to get up that early. No, it's not, man. I'll tell you, it is. I love it because my phone's not ringing. I got no one bugging me. So back to that original question, that was one of the things I had to do to learn to pull me out of this darkness. I had to spend hours working on my belief system, changing it because I had cultivated it for years. And so it took time, it took effort, it took patience. And again, luckily I had a mentor in my life to kind of guide me and keep pushing me in the right direction. But at the end of the day, I had to figure this out. And so that was probably the single greatest thing of helping me overcome my belief systems that were holding me back.
Okay, so two questions I had that just like are burning in my mind as you were talking. First of all, this idea that your belief system
Yeah.
is creating your suffering.
Yep.
So if you shift your belief system, the obvious piece then is you shift your suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Is it truly that easy? And yes, that is the easy answer of what we do. Sometimes the shift is tough,
Yes.
but that's all we have to do.
Yeah.
And we aren't shifting our belief system about anyone else and
Yep.
making them, it's only shifting your belief system about you,
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah, and one of the best lessons I learned around this is my mentor one day. I was blaming everyone for my alcoholism. I was blaming this and that and this person and this family member. And I'll never forget my mentor slapped me upside the head and said, "When are you going to finally take accountability for your life, Todd?"
Oh.
And I was like, "What?" I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "When are you going to stop blaming other people? And when are you going to stand up and rise up and do something different?" Because guess what? We can't go back and change what happened, but you can do something different today. And so what I've learned through this is taking full accountability, suffering stops. When I'm complaining and pointing fingers, suffering perpetuates, it magnifies, right? So when I started taking accountability, going, you know what? I am going to change my belief system. If I believe I'm no good, I'm going to do whatever it takes to actually get rid of that belief system. Now, it took a while. It really did. That's the
Yeah.
hard part. But I'll tell you, my suffering stopped the moment I started taking accountability for my life. And I'll tell you,
One more
no,
time. These
yes,
are such profound statements. I want you to say that one more time. And everyone listen to this. Take it
yes.
in.
My suffering stopped the moment I took accountability for my life. I had to stop blaming. And everyone listening to this, we have people in our lives who have done bad things to us. I get it. And we can blame them all you want. Like JC Dugard, she has every right to hate and blame her guy that abused her.
Yeah.
But yet she realizes through help of other people that if she does that, her suffering continues. So the moment she took accountability for her life, well, you know what? It happened, but you know what? I'm going to rise above this and I'm going to make a difference in this world and I'm going to help other people and I'm going to help them overcome what they've been through because of what I went through. Guess what? Her suffering stopped. It's amazing. Yeah, that was one of the most profound lessons I've ever learned.
That reminds me of Elizabeth Smart. When I remember so well just thinking about this woman, this young girl is going to be damaged for life, that kind of thing. And I remember they talked about this in an interview that when the night she got home and they went in her bedroom and her mom said to her, Elizabeth, this man stole 2.5 years of your life.
Yeah.
Don't let him steal one more day.
Yeah. Powerful.
And
So
then
powerful.
she started on that journey of healing and not hating and not feeling victimized, but walking into the beauty of these lessons. And look what she's done and how many people she's touched with all of these, foundation that she established and different things. It's that same kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Of, you've been suffering from this for all these years of your life. How many more years are you going to give to that suffering? Is it enough yet? Are you ready to move on? And yeah, I'm ready to make that shift. Okay, so let's go back for just a second to when you were describing, and I'm waiting on the edge of my seat to have you describe it, and you went right on past it. Ooh. I was like, no, come back here.
Come back.
Okay, you said you ought to see me doing my morning routine, and I was waiting for it, but you went right on. Okay, so let's back up. I want to be there. I want to see
All
you.
right.
So
Okay.
visually describe this to me, what your morning routine looks like.
Okay. So I start off setting my intent. Like this morning, my intent was, Todd, I'm full of light, love, and energy. Today's going to be amazing. I don't hope for success. I expect it. I demand it. That was my intent. And then I've created a personal declaration statement about my life. And I read that. It takes me about 10 minutes. And if you could see me, I actually have it on this TV screen. I've got music going and I'm standing up, and I'm just reading my declaration statement in such force. And that takes me about 10 minutes to get through. And then I'll sit down for 5 minutes, turn everything off, and I'll visualize doing everything I said in my declaration statement that I would do in my life. I see myself helping other people, being a good father, being a good husband, being a good friend, being a good coworker. I visualize me actually doing those things in vivid detail. And then I put on some low meditation music and I read this book right here, Mind is the Master by James Allen.
Absolutely. That's
So
an incredible book.
look how big this sucker is. It took me
Yeah.
6 years to read this thing the first time. I'm going through it a second time, and I'm right here now. So I got a lot to do. But I'll read from this. I'll mark it down. This book is unbelievable, like unbelievable. And
So
then
for those of you that
Yeah.
are just listening on the audio, let me tell
sorry.
you this book.
Oh,
This book is The Mind is the Master by James Allen. And if you've ever read anything by James Allen, he is one of the best, deepest, profound thought thinkers and leaders that I've ever read.
yeah, he's
And
famous.
so,
He's famous for his book "As a Man Thinketh" that was written in 1903.
exactly.
But so I'll read that for a half hour. So that's about 45 minutes into my hour. And then when I'm done with that, I sit down and I just listen to the silence for 10 minutes. I turn everything off, my phone, everything, and I just listen to the silence. People say, "Are you meditating?" You can call it that, I guess, but I actually call it, I'm just embracing the silence.
Yeah.
And then the principle I love to live by in my life is, if you want to be, give it away. If you want to be happy, give away happiness. If you want to be inspiring, inspire someone, go give it away. You get it back tenfold. And so I'll write a letter of appreciation to someone my last 5 minutes, and I put it in an envelope and a stamp and send it off in the mail. That's my hour of power.
Wow, that is an incredible hour of power.
It's amazing.
Okay.
I'm on fire when I'm done.
So I don't do these podcasts just for everybody else. I do them for me.
Sure.
And how much I learned from my guests. And because I was on your podcast, you know how I started my day during the first 10 years of my transformation.
Sure.
I looked at that little Post-it note,
Yes, I
and
love it.
after I bounced out of bed, threw my arms in the air, and said, "Welcome day, I'm here."
Yeah,
And then I'd go over and I would read that. What would I do today if I were no longer afraid? What will I
wow,
do? What will
love
I
that.
do? And I just began to visualize what my
Yeah,
day was going to be like
yeah,
without fear. And I would just live it. So
I
since I
love that.
retired, so lived that for 15 years. Since I've been retired, which has now been about 4.5 years, Todd, I've left that behind. I'm becoming aware of that as you're talking. My my first hour now is get up, get my coffee, sit in front of it's my one chance to watch the news. I watch the news, and then I start my day. But I have
Yeah,
been feeling that there's a lack of oomph. Like at the end of the hour when I know it's time to move on, I'm like, okay, I have allowed myself to shift out of what I know works. You've just changed my life today.
oh, good.
I'm
Well,
going to start my day differently. I'm going to
yeah,
get back to what I knew was power and strength and the ability to make life happen for me.
yes, I love that. It reminded me, the late Trevor Mawad. He wrote a book called "It Takes What It Takes," and he references in a talk that if it was a study that was done, if you watch 3 minutes of news, 3 minutes of news, you have a 27% more chance of having a bad day just by
Oh,
watching 3 minutes. Now, again, not to say that that's what you're doing, but it was interesting. I thought, wow, again, back to your point, Mary. When we win the first hour of the day, we will win the rest of the day. I love that statement. It's so true. It's so true. And so, yeah. And right back at you, man. When you're on my podcast, I learned so much from you. I mean, I still have my notes that I took from all the stuff you were saying.
you were just writing
Oh,
furiously.
furiously. And so anyway, we're learning from each other, and that's why I'm so grateful I know you, Mary, and grateful that we get to rub shoulders and to do
Yeah.
this amazing podcast with you. So it's been
We'll have
awesome.
to we'll have to meet up in 3 years and say I'll be able to tell you about my amazing power
Yeah,
of hour and how
there
I
we
went
go.
back and reclaimed and what happened as a result of that. I'm already just like visualizing how different my day is going to be.
Yeah,
If you
yeah, it's
win the first hour, you win the entire day.
yep,
Wow.
yep.
Okay. I'm sold. I'm there. I'm with you. I'm back on track. Mary's home.
Nice, nice.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the one question that you asked me that day that I felt like I really needed to take a deep breath and go forward.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about the listeners on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You're like me, you have a variety of people who listen.
Sure.
And what I didn't know was how many of my friends listen to you. I was like, they were like, you were on Todd Sylvester's podcast? Oh, he's fabulous. I'm like, yeah, that was me. I was on. So I was thinking about the people who were listening to your podcast, even though there's a huge variety like me. I have men, I have women, I have old people, I have young people, I have people in the middle,
Yeah.
people just trying to keep their nose above the waterline, and I have people who are sinking underneath.
Yeah.
And so your listeners, you have a lot of people who are in the recovery mode who
Mm-hmm.
listen to your podcast. And I felt the weight of what I would say to be so profound that you can
Yeah.
either support someone's change in life
Mm-hmm.
or you can leave them flatlined. And that's when I dug deep.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you that question. I want you to think about my 20,000 listeners and all the people who are listening. And what is it that you would say to them today that they right today can implement and help make that shift from their belief system and stop the suffering?
Yeah. Well, that's easy.
Okay, I'm glad it was easy for you because for me, I was like,
well, well, this is for anyone listening that you just mentioned, all your listeners and anyone that will hear this in the future, this is the single greatest truth about you, period. Here it is. So if you got a pen and paper, get ready to write this down because I don't want you to forget this. The most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there's nothing wrong with you. I'm going to repeat that. The most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there's nothing wrong with you. The challenge we have, and I'm there too, so I'm not saying I'm above you because I'm not, is that we tell ourselves a different story. The most powerful force in the human psyche is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And that story typically it's negative, right? That's what's causing the suffering. Now, when I say there's nothing wrong with you, it doesn't mean we don't have stuff to work on. What I mean is to your core. Like any one of you who's listening has kids, if I said, what's the value of your kid from 0 to 100%? What would you say? Every one of you is going to say, they're at 100%. And I'll say, well, yeah, but they screw up. They make mistakes. They're not perfect, right? And they'll say, it doesn't matter to me. They're at 100. Yeah, they make mistakes, but they're at 100. But isn't it funny that we have a hard time seeing that with ourselves? You're at 100 too, but yet you tell yourself a different story. I'd put myself down around 20 to 30%, maybe. That's the problem. So again, the truth is there's nothing wrong with you. So that's my message.
there's nothing wrong with you,
Yep.
but we still have stuff to work on.
Well, yeah, but to your core, Mary, Mary, you're good. Your worth is already set. You don't have to do anything above anything else for me to look at you and go, you're amazing. And I know you have your flaws. I have mine too. I don't care. I really don't care because you're human, but your worth is set. It's done. It's over. It's there. And when you can embrace, and by the way, we embraced that when we were little kids, when we were all, yay tall. We loved ourselves. We loved everyone. We had faith as big as the universe. But somewhere along the way, we become adults and we think we know better. And so now we're miserable. It's like, no, we had it figured out when we were kids.
Yeah.
So let's be more childlike, not childish, but childlike. If we're more like that, I'm telling you, it's game over, man.
That just struck me so deep, Todd. I can remember thinking when I was little, you're someone special.
Yeah.
Did you know? You will know. You're someone special. And yet I went through so many years of changing that belief system and all that was wrong with me, and thus all the suffering.
Yeah.
Until I came back to, I am special. I am someone. I am me. I am unique. I am not better than. I'm not less than. I'm unique and I'm me. That is one of the most profound things. You are absolutely right.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank
You're
you for
welcome.
bringing that message, all your messages, to my listeners today.
Thank you.
Todd,
Thanks for
I
having
wish
me.
you could put a plug in just for a second right now, and that you could hear the audio of all the people that you touched today. Hear their applause, hear their tears, hear their joy for knowing that there are steps forward. Stop for just a minute. Can you hear them?
Yeah.
That's the pebble. That's the ripple effect.
Yeah.
That's what we live for. That's why you and I do what we do.
Yep. Yeah,
It's
beautifully
because
said.
we know there are people that will be touched and that we can lift. And you're
Beautifully
one of the
said.
best lifters I know.
You're kind. Thank you, Mary.
I'm just honest. I'm not really kind. I'm just honest.
Yeah.
Todd, thanks for being here today. And we've included your website and your podcast link, as well as social media
Great.
links
Thank
on the
you.
end of this podcast, so people can still stay in touch with you, watch you,
Great.
listen to you, and
Thank
find
you.
a little bit of time to create your hour of power.
Yes.
I'm committed.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give this a month, and then I'm going to just reach out to you and say, guess what has happened to me in a month?
love it.
I know there's just miraculous things like opening this door. Woo!
I love it.
All right, Todd, thank you for being with us today. And to all of my listeners, to all of my people who watch, this is how we do it. This is how we craft that meaningful life. We don't just watch life go by us. We jump in and we make a difference, first with ourselves and then with others. And what a better way to craft our meaningful life. Namaste.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.